The Motion Picture Association of America says online piracy costs the entertainment industry $58 billion in economic output every year. So they've sponsored a bill called SOPA, or the Stop Online Piracy Act, now in the House Judiciary Committee. But Silicon Valley tech giants like Google and Yahoo say the bill is dangerous to free speech, with Markham Erickson of Net Coalition calling it thermonuclear war against the internet. Joining us for more now on this is MPAA Chairman and former Senator Chris Dodd, live from Washington. Welcome back to Bloomberg West, Senator. First of all, you've got people out there saying this is war. Is it war? Is this a line in the sand between Hollywood and Silicon Valley?
Well, I'd hope not. That's the worst possible conclusion you could have. The internet has been an incredible asset for people all over the world, creating access to information that was unavailable even a few years ago. This ought not to be a situation where you have to choose between technology and content. Content needs technology, and technology needs content. And these two communities absolutely need each other for the future. And so we need to be talking about how this can happen. Talking about war, or this is the end of the internet, or denial of free speech, are all frivolous, silly arguments that don't really go to the heart of the question. And that is when you have international criminals, foreign sites, stealing the intellectual property, the copyright businesses, not only the film and television industry, but also other industries that have knockoff products being stolen, intellectual property being stolen from aerospace, from things such as bulletproof vests and equipment for firefighters. This is a serious issue that deserves attention. I will give the industry, the technology, credit for this. No one's arguing about whether or not we ought to deal with these rogue, criminal foreign sites that steal American jobs and products. We all understand something needs to be done. We're now arguing about how best to do this, and that's a major breakthrough.
Now, the question, though, is I guess, how this bill is worded. We spoke with someone from the Electronic Frontier Foundation who said this imposes on fundamental freedom of speech. Take a listen to what Rainey Reitman had to say.
When you give the Attorney General the ability to cut off whole domain names without really giving enough proper authority to people to respond to these issues, you really are cutting off speech in a fundamental way, and that's, honestly, it's anti-American.
How do you respond to claims that this bill is anti-American?
Well, first of all, to suggest the Attorney General is going to bring frivolous lawsuits is somewhat more frightening in many ways than the accusation. This is anything but the case. This is not actions brought by individuals or small companies or others who may feel as though their property is being infringed upon, but rather the due process that must go through various steps before an action can be brought. And to suggest somehow this is denial of free speech or comparing it to repressive governments around the world who do deprive people of their freedoms is insulting to dissidents in many ways who seek freedom not because they desire to download pirated movies. It's insulting, in fact, to people who suffer under those regimes here. We're talking about blocking the ability to steal American ideas and American products and American jobs from foreign sites. We do it domestic sites, and we've closed down many. No one's broken the internet. No one suggested freedom of speech has been hampered by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act that passed a number of years ago. The problem has been is that these thieves are now migrating offshore, locating themselves in places that are beyond the jurisdiction of U.S. courts. And so we need to come up with a mechanism to protect our jobs and protect the intellectual property by going after those sites or those search engines that allow these illegal criminal foreign sites to exist.
Now, the analogy has been made that if, for example, a street vendor is selling counterfeit goods, this is like cutting off the street rather than going directly to the vendor. Is this really a fair way to do it? Couldn't this put legitimate web companies out of business? We've talked to some of them who are really afraid that that's going to happen.
Well, I think that's a very legitimate issue to raise, and we would not be, nor I would be, supporting legislation that would take legitimate sites here that are not fundamentally engaged, as these sites are, with the thievery of American products and jobs. And that's why you have the due process set up in a way so that you protect against those kind of actions that people worry about. I don't think they're wrong to worry about it, but they need to take a good look at the legislation, understand how carefully this Senator Leahy and Senator Hatch and Lamar Smith and Howard Berman, Democrats and Republicans, in a bipartisan basis, The bill in the Senate passed unanimously, Senate Democrats and Republicans joining together in the Protect Intellectual Property Act. And the same is true in the House. Now, there's some people who disagree with this, but the overwhelming majority who are working on this bill have done so in a very careful, targeted, narrow way so as to minimize the very danger that your commentator just made.
The tech industry is sponsoring its own draft of this bill. How willing are you to consider other options? Have you taken a look at this one yet?
Yeah, I have, and it's their idea is to have the International Trade Commission become the policeman in all of this. Well, candidly, the federal courts have been dealing with copyright for almost 200 years. The first copyright legislation was adopted in 1790. In fact, it's the only provision of law that's specifically written into the original Constitution of our country. That's how far back protecting copyright goes in our nation. And the federal courts have done a good job at this over the years. The International Trade Commission would mean that everyone would have to come to Washington. The average case before the International Trade Commission takes 2 years to handle, and anyone who has got any opinion on it can, of course, become a party to the lawsuit. So, frankly, I appreciate the fact that the authors of those ideas acknowledge that foreign criminal sites stealing intellectual property must be stopped. So now we're not arguing about whether or not that ought to happen. We're now arguing about the means to do it. And with all due respect to the authors of those ideas, that idea really doesn't get to the heart of the problem.
It's a matter of how Congress returns to session in a couple of weeks. We'll be following what happens with SOPA. Former Senator Dodd, chairman of the MPAA, thanks so much for joining us here on Bloomberg West.
Thank you.